Underlying love, beneath the surface it lies, in the whispers of secrets and unspoken ties, caught between the heart's gentle tug and the dance of romance, in the arms of love.
You are listening to Bradley Barkhurst's Underlying Love, a Worthington, Ohio mystery. Chapter 6, Part 1, Disturbance in the Grove. Elizabeth awoke early to turn on the stove to heat water for the tea. She was hoping it would soothe her conflicted thoughts. The feel of Samuel's lips pressed upon hers, she could still feel. The autumn chill was setting in, leaves transforming into dazzling hues outside her window. The swirl of the leaves and her emotions lingered, and Halloween would be here before they knew it. The kettle full of water started to warm up. A faint whisper of steam began rising as the metal base slowly heated. The kettle rattled softly as the water inside started churning. Gradually, the noises grew louder, the steam hissing, water bubbling audibly now. Just as it began emitting a high-pitched whistle, a sudden thud on the front porch made Elizabeth jump. She rushed to the window and peeked out. There was the milkman, Mr. Bailey, placing the milk bottles on her steps briskly before climbing into his idling Gabble Dairy milk truck. Elizabeth watched as he pulled away with a little wave. She opened the front door to find the fresh milk bottles on the step, condensation already beating on the glass. She reached down to grab the milk bottles and the morning paper. Glancing up, she spotted Mr. Bailey down the street in his delivery truck. The rear wheels on the driver's side were caked with mud. Something about the milkman's truck didn't sit right. The kettle was now screeching insistently. Elizabeth hurried to pull it from the burner before the whistle became ear-splitting. As she poured the steaming water into her teacup, she resolved to tell Betty about the odd observation. Elizabeth thought back to the previous night at the Worthington station. Milkman Bailey had crept up on them unexpectedly while they were investigating. She shivered slightly, recalling the eerie encounter. As she sat down at the kitchen table, Elizabeth added a splash of milk and a dash of sugar to her tea. She would have to keep an eye on the over-eager milkman. His muddy tires suggested he too may have visited the crime scene recently. Sipping the hot drink, Elizabeth steeled herself for another day of unraveling Worthington's mystery. But before doing that, she had to browse the Worthington newspaper. Sipping her tea, Elizabeth unfolded the morning paper. The front page bore a solemn headline: Banker Collins, to be laid to rest today. Suspected killer arrested. It noted that Mr. Collins was survived by his wife and daughter, and donations could be made to support the grieving family. Setting down the paper, Elizabeth telephoned Worthington Cabs to request a ride to the cemetery. She had decided to pay her respects at Gracie's burial site this morning and to meet her uncle and mother there before the funeral service. Donning a simple black dress, the necklace Aunt Gracie gave to her, and a jacket, Elizabeth locked up and climbed into the waiting taxi. The ride to Walnut Grove Cemetery was silent, giving her time to collect her thoughts. When they arrived at Walnut Grove's wrought iron gates, Elizabeth could see the mourners gathered outside for Mr. Collins's funeral. Elizabeth quietly got out of the cab away from the gathering and tipped her driver a quarter. As she walked slowly past the Collins service, she offered a silent prayer for the struggling family. Even though she did not see eye to eye with Mrs. Collins, she would never wish anything like what they experienced for any family. As Elizabeth walked past the gathering for Mr. Collins, little Amy suddenly broke from her mother and ran over her. Despite the somber setting, she was grinning ear to ear.
Miss Russo! Miss Russo! Dr. Bentley says he's taking me and Mother to Hollywood so I can become a movie star,
she exclaimed breathlessly. Elizabeth masked her surprise, simply replying,
How nice for you, dear.
In truth, she found it odd that the wealthy Dr. Bentley, the town's physician, had suddenly taken such an interest in the Collins family. Perhaps, though, he was trying to help them in this time of grief. Just then, Mrs. Collins noticed Amy's absence and hurried over, scolding her back to the funeral party. Elizabeth offered a polite nod before continuing. She walked further into the older circle part of the cemetery. The trees were larger, and there were people buried there as far back as the War of 1812. Every Memorial Day, the parade ended up in that section where a tribute was made to the fallen soldiers who gave the ultimate sacrifice to the country. The leaves covered the ground with a beautiful array of colors. Aunt Gracie could not have had a more beautiful day to be buried in the cemetery.
Elizabeth,
Called her mother from a distance. Elizabeth raised her head and saw her mother standing with Uncle Herbert underneath a grand oak tree. They wanted to meet in the cemetery to inspect the gravesite before the church service and burial. Elizabeth greeted both of them with a hug. There was a glance of sadness from Uncle Herbert, but then as he stepped back to look at Elizabeth, a large smile appeared on his face.
You wore your aunt's necklace. She would have been thrilled.
He smiled. The three of them held hands and shared a moment of silence for old Gracie. It was enough to give them the energy to make it to the church service.
All right, ladies, we have an appointment to keep,
said Uncle Herb, as he motioned the two to the opened doors of his Studebaker. He drove them to downtown Columbus's St. Joseph Cathedral for the service. The church bells rang as they pulled past the hearse funeral car waiting out front. They turned into the cathedral parking lot. As the three of them walked in, the organs swelled inside the church. The sounds of her mother and Elizabeth's high-heeled shoes sounded on top of the granite flooring. As they walked up to the front pew, people came up to greet them. There were far more people who showed up for the service than Elizabeth had anticipated. Though Gracie had grown up in Worthington, it had been several decades since she moved down to Cincinnati to live with Herb before the Great Depression. She still had a lot of high school friends in town, and many made the trek up from Price Hill, a suburb of the city. It was her intention to be buried in Walnut Grove alongside her parents. Herb wanted her happy and got a plot next to hers. Elizabeth sat with her mother and Uncle Herbert in the quiet church, absently rubbing Gracie's necklace between her fingers.
Gracie would be so touched to see you wearing that,
her mother whispered. Elizabeth nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Suddenly, the solemn silence was pierced by the roar of a motorcycle pulling up outside. The doors creaked open, and heavy footsteps echoed down the aisle. There was George, clad in a black leather jacket.
Apologies for my late arrival,
he muttered, squeezing in next to a dismayed Elizabeth. As the opening hymn commenced, Elizabeth glanced back and spotted Samuel standing respectfully in the rear pew. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave a small nod of understanding. The priest began the Mass with a homily about life's fragility and the hope of everlasting peace. Though Gracie has left this earth, her spirit will live on in our hearts and memories, he proclaimed. The brilliant hues of sunlight streaming through the stained glass splashed color around the church, as if Gracie's vigor was there among them. Elizabeth was profoundly comforted, imagining her aunt at rest in a beautiful realm beyond this world. After the moving service, the funeral procession solemnly wound its way back to Walnut Grove Cemetery. Leaves in brilliant hues of red and gold drifted down from the trees, nature's own confetti bidding Gracie farewell. At the graveside, the casket was gently lowered down as voices raised in the poignant strains of Amazing Grace, a fitting tribute to Aunt Gracie's beautiful spirit. Elizabeth shed cathartic tears, her mother squeezing her hand supportively. Back at Elizabeth's home, Elizabeth and her mother prepared a buffet supper for family members. Roasted turkey with sage dressing, sweet potato casserole, green beans, warm, buttery rolls with jam. Gracie's favorite foods filled the house with comforting aromas. They shared memories and comforted one another late into the evening. Though Gracie was gone, her vivacious imprint on their hearts remained. After the guests and George had departed, Elizabeth turned to her mother.
When do you think you'll come back to Worthington now that Gracie has passed?
Her mother paused thoughtfully.
Dear, I've decided to remain in Cincinnati. I'm quite content there. My bridge club friends, the Catholic parish I've joined, and Uncle Herbert nearby.
Elizabeth was taken aback.
But what about the house here?
Well, you and George will need it to start a family.
Her mother replied matter-of-factly.
I'm looking forward to visiting my future grandkids often.
Elizabeth felt uneasy at this presumption. In all the chaos, she had scarcely thought about having children with George. The idea no longer held the same appeal as it once did.
We'll see about that, Mother. Let's get through the wedding first.
Elizabeth answered carefully. Her mother simply smiled and squeezed her hand, lost in rosy visions of the future. But privately, Elizabeth harbored growing doubts about the path to which she had committed. The possibilities from here seemed far less clear. After an emotionally draining day, Elizabeth bid her mother and Uncle Herbert good night as they retired to the guest room and living room couch. Alone in her bedroom, Elizabeth's mind spun with the day's events. She kept returning to little Amy Collins' claim that Dr. Bentley planned to whisk them away to Hollywood and stardom. It made no sense. Bentley was a reclusive doctor, not an entertainment mogul. Where were these extravagant promises coming from? And how did he have the means after the Depression had ravaged so many fortunes? As exhaustion overtook her, Elizabeth's racing thoughts blurred into hazy dreams where she saw her Aunt Gracie. She turned to her with a warm smile.
You're always a wonderful niece.
She laughed lightly.
I miss you, Aunt Gracie. I wish I knew what to do.
She squeezed Elizabeth's hand. Her face grew serious.
Elizabeth, your place is to fight for truth and justice. There is darkness to be conquered in Worthington. There is something dirty going on.
Her image began fading into fog as Elizabeth called out.
Wait, what do you mean?
Elizabeth awoke with a start, pale moonlight filtering through the curtains. Her aunt's words lingered, like the perfume of a woman who had recently left a building. Elizabeth thought of the shadowy figure fleeing the Collins home, the key to unraveling this mystery. If only she could expose whoever it was running past her house. Morning came too soon, her mother rapping on the door.
Rise and shine, Sunday morning. Time to get ready for church.
Elizabeth rubbed her eyes and slowly dressed, body weary, but spirit restless. She needed to speak with Samuel and Betty about their amateur investigation. After the Sunday church service, where Elizabeth spent more time daydreaming than praying, she declined to join her family for Sunday brunch.
I should prepare my lessons for tomorrow,
she told her mother. There was a flash of disappointment, but no argument. She hugged her mother and Uncle Herbert and wished them a safe trip back to Cincinnati.
Thank you for listening to Underlying Love, a Worthington, Ohio mystery. Will Elizabeth address her growing doubts about starting a family with George, especially considering her mother's expectations? Will Elizabeth's dreams and Aunt Gracie's words provide valuable insights or clues that help her in solving the mystery? And will Betty find her missing Jell-O recipe? Find out more in the next exciting episode, Chapter 6, Part 2, Disturbance in the Grove.
On a Sunday morning in an old church pew, I close my eyes, I'm feeling brand new. In remembrance of Aunt Gracie, she loved this song. Her spirit's here with us, forever strong. The banjo's strumming, the fiddle's playing sweet. I can hear Aunt Gracie's voice in every beat. In remembrance of Aunt Gracie, her faith so pure, her love for bluegrass gospel forever secure. In remembrance of Aunt Gracie, let the music play. We'll sing hallelujahs on this glorious day. Through bluegrass gospel we honor her grace, in remembrance of Aunt Gracie in this sacred space.